welcome to our panel, The Science of Art, here at Comic-Con 2021. We have with us 4 incredible women in STEM, and we can't wait to share all of the insight they have with you guys today. So my name is Lila Foxland. I will be your moderator. My background is in mechatronics engineering. I'm now a full-time YouTuber and content creator, but this isn't about me. So to get things started, let's do some introductions. I want to hear who each of you are in real life, but also who mirrors you the most in the fictional world. So how about Sam, you can go first.
Hey everyone, I am Samantha T. Porter and I am a digital archaeologist. So I like to say I use some of the newest technologies like 3D scanning and augmented and virtual reality to learn more about some of the oldest technologies. So I study Neanderthals and I wore them on my shirt because they're cool. And if I had to pick a character that I think I most resemble from a purely aesthetic, and I also just think is great point of view, I'm gonna go with Dr. Aphra from the Star Wars comics. So Lucasfilm, give me a call. Yeah, right here.
Sydney, do you wanna go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Sydney Hamilton. I'm an aerospace engineer and mathematician by study. And what I do for a living is make the world a smaller place, whether that's satellites to keep us connected like we are now, or flying on an airplane to see a loved one. Those are the things that I work on. And it's super exciting work. So for me, of course, so excited to say my favorite princess of all time is the person that I also happen to resemble, Shuri. So that would be who I think I resemble in popular media.
And you've cosplayed as her as well.
I have. Coincidence? I think not.
Well, we're on the space theme. Erica, do you wanna go next?
Hi, my name is Erica Hamden. I'm a professor of astrophysics. I build telescopes, most of which do not stay on the ground. They go either to space or up into the stratosphere on high altitude balloons. And I'm interested in understanding like how galaxies form and how stars form. I'm really into formation. And the popular media person that most resembles me, I would say, is Jane Foster from the MCU, maybe before she becomes Thor. But she's a fun astrophysicist who is doing things out in the field, a bunch of weird stuff happening all the time.
Awesome. Miriam?
Hi, I'm Maria Perez, and I'm a paleontologist, a fossil preparator to be exact. So I spend my time unearthing fossils that have been buried in what we call matrix or rock for millions of years old. And naturally, I think Dr. Alan Grant from Jurassic Park is probably the closest for a paleontologist. I know I've been called, oh, it's Ross, but I've heard he's kind of a jerk on Friends. So I'm gonna say Dr. Grant.
Awesome choices all around. So we've all had people that we think resemble us in media or the things that we do, but what is the best example you have of your work being portrayed really, really well in popular media? Like, what do you point out at TV and tell a little kid like, hey, that's me, and you could do that when you grow up too? So someone can.
So I'll start with this one. So in the movie Interstellar, there is a black hole that they like go through a wormhole, and there's a black hole with all these planets around it, and the black hole is called Gargantua. And the film depiction of the black hole is actually at the time was the best simulation of how a black hole would look if you could like see it with your eyes. And they used like supercomputers to do all these calculations with like full general relativity and like the whole, like all the physics included to make this like incredible visualization. And it's beautiful. And it's also like extremely scientifically accurate. Like they like hit it perfectly. And then if you look a couple years later, the astronomers imaged a black hole at the center of another galaxy for the first time. And the pictures of it actually are very similar to some of those simulations that they had done for Interstellar. And I just like love that. I mean, there's a lot of other great things about that movie, but the black hole was just like so spectacular.
That's incredible. I had no idea. Wow.
And it has such a good name, Gargantua. It's so good.
Are there any black holes actually named Gargantua?
No, none of the black holes have like real names. It'll be like, oh, the black hole at the center of like M83, or the black hole at the center of our galaxy, which is also called Sagittarius A star, which is like a lame name for what is like a supermassive black hole.
If you discovered a black hole, what would you name it?
Oh, that's a tough one. I feel like I would want to name it something like sort of malevolent, but also awesome. So like maybe Ursula, actually.
Oh, I like that.
For pulling that right out of your head, that's exceptional. Sorry to put you on the spot there. I just had to get
That was a tough one.
Well, I've got kind of a roundabout answer. And so my first reaction to that is like none. Everything is terrible. No, our archaeologists, not anything like that. And like most people are thinking like Indiana Jones, they're thinking like Laura Croft, right? And they're right, so especially Indiana Jones, right? That's a like at this point 40-year-old portrayal of what archaeology was like 90 years ago. And now what he's doing in that opening scene, we call looting. We call that taking stuff from people. So in terms
Did they
of
not
like,
call it looting 40 years ago? That's
yeah,
funny.
it's complicated. It's complicated. So in terms of like actual modern media, I think what spoke to me most was actually the scene in Black Panther in the museum, right? When they're talking about like, where did this stuff come from, right? And that's a really intense ongoing discussion we have right now, right? So like, you know, Indiana Jones is like, yeah, all this stuff belongs in a museum, right? And now the question is, does it, right? And it was really kind of cool to see that in popular media, right? Even though the museum people are sort of the bad guys in that, right? Bringing up this question of what is this actually, you know, all about? So I'm going to go with Black
Do you have an
Panther
answer to
story.
that question or an opinion of
I
the
say
answer to that question?
everything is complicated. Right? And it's, you know, some stuff, right? If folks want it in a museum or if that's your ancestors, right? More power to you. But if you didn't have a choice in how that stuff ended up there, right? Maybe we need to have a little, you know, conversation. So
What are the alternatives that you believe in to museums?
yeah, so a lot of it is right. Just ask the community, ask what they want, and there's all sorts of right talk about how can we work together, right? What's the best way to preserve stuff and to research stuff? Also, I won't say that also. In a way where, you know, you're not coming in as some outside authority and sort of dictating, oh, you know, I dug up your ancestors and this is what I think, right? Sort of reckoning with that, I think, and really just taking a moment to think about, you know, what are the broader implications of this, right? Who does this affect? And again, that's going to vary depending on your situation, depending on where you're working, when you're working, all that sort of stuff. But I like that we're actually, you know, we have a long way to go, but we're finally starting to have those conversations more concretely.
And putting them in popular media.
Yes.
Amazing. Who's itching to go next?
I'll go ahead and go. So the first 10 minutes of Jurassic Park are okay. They're okay. It's the prep part. You discover the fossil, and of course it's beautiful raptor. It's all articulated. All the bones are where they're supposed to be anatomically, and that very rarely happens in paleontology. It depends on where you are searching for fossils, but for something like that, we don't find it articulated most of the time. So it's a little bit inaccurate. And the prep was actually being done on that raptor skeletons. They were going through and actually prepping stuff that should have been done in a lab, because we have microscopes and magnification that we can look under and make sure we're not damaging any fossils. So I'm really sad that they didn't go into more of like the prep stuff, but hey, you know, they're there for the live dinosaurs and part of the movie.
So what's a movie or a TV show or something that you think portrays really well what you do?
Oh, I don't know, to be honest.
Hasn't happened yet? You're still waiting?
I'm sorry?
Hasn't happened yet? You're still waiting?
I'm still waiting, but you know, that is interesting. I guess a live movie would be to go to a museum and see the glass laboratories that a lot of places have and watch it in real time. But
Or you
Excellent
can start
answer.
your own show.
Ooh.
Hey,
I'll be tuning in.
hey, if
for that.
Lucasfilms is still watching this
Yeah.
panel,
Just
I
get
know, you have
everyone-
your full cast right here.
Miria, weren't you just out in the field? What were you doing?
oh yes, I was out in the field the past week or so, and we were looking for all kinds of stuff. We were in the White River Formation, where you find extinct mammals like oreodonts, which are super weird looking. Then we were in the Mesa Verde, which is where we're finding dinosaurs. We were digging up a new species of ceratopsian. It was really cool.
That sounds so awesome.
that's amazing.
Thanks.
And for me, I mean, I was gonna say Interstellar as well, because there was a lot of great research done. A lot of people had I heard that there were a lot of consulting with experts to make sure of the accuracies, which I can really appreciate, which we kind of talked about. Getting the people who are actually doing the thing or the owners of that topic or subject and getting them involved so that they can have a say and really feel invested. And then you also increase the accuracy of your movie, and it becomes fun for everyone, because then I can watch it and I'd be like, oh, commercial airplanes do not fly upside down. We don't build them to do that. Every time that happens and everyone's like, oh, I'm like, oh, that's not accurate. So you wanna keep everyone engaged and involved. Apollo 13 was so realistic.
So good. So
It was
good.
almost like a documentary. Like, you forget that you're watching people acting. You're like, oh, but this is actually how it's happening.
I think that is like close to a perfect movie.
Absolutely. And so that would be my other one. And then Hidden Figures, of course, I have to give them a shout out. However, I would say there were a couple of inaccuracies in a sense of the conditions that those ladies worked in were much worse than what were described in the movie. And I get it, that is a little bit of movie magic to make it inclusive. And also I question some of the timing of like when she's doing the calculations, like was it like how much time lapse was actually in between.
Some dramatization.
Yeah, there's a little
on.
drama in there, a little movie.
Little Hollywood pixie dust.
Yeah, little salt, Salt Bay on you. But overall, I really appreciated the fact that that was highlighted. Also, some very documentary-like, but still Apollo 13, definitely fantastic depiction of aerospace.
So this is a little bit off script, and I apologize, but based on like what you guys were just talking about, where do you think the role of really accurate science fiction films versus really dramatized like Star Wars level films, and like how important is it that all films are really accurate, or do you think a dramatization is really important in just getting people excited about it?
I would love to speak on this because Jurassic Park is something, the first couple of movies, they really tried to make it scientifically accurate. They had a bunch of scientists actually participate and try to make it very accurate. And when it became Jurassic World, you start getting into movie monsters, which is okay. And it is a movie monster film, but I really wish that they had used other dinosaurs that we have alive, or not alive today, but we have.
It's like, whoa,
We got cats and birds, we got
there are so many cool dinosaurs. You didn't have to make one, that we have some really cool stuff. And I think part of what makes Jurassic Park, at least the first couple of films, so kind of scary and intense is because these things were alive. There's this part that's real about them. They existed and they were real, and now they're brought to life. And then when you add in kind of monster making in there, it gets a little removed. So, but that's me. That's just a biased opinion from somebody who works with fossils.
I mean, it's super accurate, and like you raise a lot of good points. Why make something up when you can have experts tell you something that might even be cooler?
And then you get people who are really interested in science through that. So many paleontologists, actually new paleontologists, were inspired by the Jurassic Park franchise, which is pretty cool. And people get excited about dinosaurs, which often leads them to STEM careers.
Yeah, I feel like half the people I went to school with only went to engineering school because they wanted to be Iron Man.
I think that it makes if you want your movie or your media to be like scientifically accurate, it gives you kind of like a boundary where you have to be more creative, because you can't just be like, oh, now they can do anything. Like, you don't have to rely on like a Deus ex machina. You can actually, like, you know, the boundary forces you to come up with something that's like more interesting or more clever than just being able to like make your monster dinosaur, that you have to like actually like put more work into other aspects of it. I think that, but I don't think that it really limits you. I think that you can do like super interesting stuff within the confines of like what is possible. I think like one of the movies I think about a lot that I feel like almost got this good for like physics was Gravity, where you had this like truly beautiful movie and like these beautiful shots, and some of the stuff was highly accurate and others was not at all. But there were certain scenes where it was like they made these non-physical choices, and I just felt like you could still do it with the physics being right, and it would still have the emotional impact, and it would still be like beautiful and fantastic. But so there's sometimes where I'm just like, oh, you were so close, like it was so close. But
I'm gonna play on the other side of that, of like seeing the Star Wars, more specifically seeing the Star Trek, because there is a difference between sci-fi and sci-fantasy. But like when you're looking at Star Trek, you see people's minds turn like, well, how can I make that happen? So sometimes there's an inspirational aspect to it when you see what's happening in movies. Like, well, what would it take to be able to go that fast? What would it take to be able to actually meet other species? Which I have my own little like, all right, you guys, let's not make everyone disappointed that when we find aliens, they might just be microorganisms. I would love to see more micro, like small aliens, so that they're not all going to be shaped like humanoids, just based off of like the climate of each planet. So, there's that part. But however, going from galaxy to galaxy, people really are passionate about that. They're excited. And so I love the creativity in there to say, it also teaches people certain language, warp speed. All right, well, what does that mean? And now people are curious about it. It's fun, it's relatable. And especially Star Trek, I think they did a beautiful job of just being inclusive in a subtle way to show how large groups of different species can work together to do amazing things. And so I think that there's like great lessons, but also it makes us think, well, how can we make what we see on TV real, even though they based it off of something real that they saw. So it's like a circular innovation loop that I really like.
It's sort of, I think that ties really well to this panel of like the science of art. Well, maybe art is also driving science.
Mm-hmm. I think so. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Someone gets creative and now we try to figure out how to make it real. I doubt we would have the Batmobile driving down the street if we didn't have Batman's initial design in the comics. So you see a lot of them mirroring each other. So it's like a hand in hand. As soon as the technology is available and the artist has drawn it, now we're going to make it real. And then you see it in real life and you're like, wow, what if it could look like this? And it just keeps growing and growing.
Yeah.
So
was there a technology or something that inspired any of you guys when you were really little, where you grew up thinking like, I wonder if I could understand that, or if I could make that real?
I'll say not exactly, but like when I was growing up, I actually didn't want to be an archaeologist. I wanted to go into special effects. So I watched all those behind the scenes stuff. I watched the live streams when they were recording like Attack of the Clones or whatever. Like, oh, what are they using there? Like making props, all that. And it's kind of like roundabout, right? But a lot of what I do now in my archaeology job actually sort of ties into that, right? So we're doing all types of cool digital imaging, right? We're making 3D scans like in archaeology the same way folks are making 3D scans for video games, right? Like there's actually a lot that overlaps that you don't necessarily think about at first. So I would say just interest for me in media and technology in general technology used to produce media, I think is kind of one of those initial sparks that got me interested in both science, but also in creative ways of using science.
I'll go a little off topic, but the reason I chose fossil prep is you have this combo of art and science. Uh, when we're working in the lab and we have one of a kind fossil that we need to duplicate, we do what's called molding and casting. And so that's an artistic and kind of chemistry in there involved. And when you make that cast, you want to match it the fossil so you can have something that other scientists can actually look and study, and you get to paint and kind of we call nature faking. So we learn how to kind of do paint and science at the same time. I know that wasn't quite on track, but I definitely wanted to share that.
Yeah, that's so cool. It's one of those like the STEM versus STEAM, like how much is art integrated into science? And I feel like everyone's pretty much agreed it's a very, very important part of what we do.
I think, I wanted to say, like, your comment made me think about how like science is such a creative process. And I think that's really underappreciated, that like there isn't really a distinction, I think, because you have to be like thinking of things in new ways, and you have to be trying out new processes, and the whole it's like an act of creation all the time. But I think people view scientists as like a lot more, I don't know, like regimented or you just like do certain steps in a certain order, but like the reality is that it's like an extremely creative life.
Yeah, I tell my mentees all the time, nobody wants to buy an ugly plane. You can have the coolest, most souped up, best technology in there, and if it looks rinky-dink, not cool, you will lose your customers, because they'll go to the one that's like, it gets the job done, but as soon as they park, everyone's like, whoa, look at that. People want that. Aesthetic is important. People want that wow factor, especially if you're purchasing a plane. So like, it's so important. And as a designer, I've worked as a designer, and each one of those parts are your little babies. Like, you get to put your own little signature. There's like certain things that I do that are like my preferences, that I know my part is flying right now, but I feel like it's beautiful.
Sydney, what's your favorite part?
I have a 3D printed part for a satellite, which I think is so cool, because I had no idea that you could 3D print parts for like aerospace grade metal 3D print part. And so it is an electrical bracket. It's very like intricate and beautiful. It used to be 300 parts, and now it's one very light part. And so that's one of my favorites, because I have a copy of it, and I know that it's also in space. So
That's awesome.
my name is in space. I mean, not really, but in my mind.
Next time, your name is going to be engraved on there, right?
Exactly.
And I'll kind of branch off of that as well. So a lot of what I do is sort of like scientific illustration or like figure making, right? So, right, not everyone's going to go to the middle of nowhere for your archaeological site. So when you're communicating, right, and it can be to other scientists, but also, right, it's really important to be able to communicate to just people who are interested in stuff, right? And, right, learning to draw things, learning to make really pretty, but also understandable graphics, right? That's also combining that creativity, and that scientific knowledge. And you really kind of have to have both of those skills and able to be doing that well also. So that's something I really like.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm so sorry.
Fine.
Paleo art is huge. There is another kind of subset of paleontology, and it's Paleo Artists, where they work with scientists and try to determine what the ecosystem is like, and everything that's most up to date, reconstruction of animals, which are important to share with people to get people interested and care about our ancient world.
So growing up, I personally watched a lot of Bones. I don't know if you guys ever saw that show, but it's probably like terribly inaccurate, but I was really into Angela and how she could just like figure everything out as an artist. And I really like how they gave her an art degree and then made her hyper technical. So it helps me overlook some of the other things that I'm sure that they did. But what topic do you guys think was, or characters were portrayed not like the science wasn't as accurate, but maybe the characters really were?
Well, I got to call out Bones because it has the most cringy thing that's closest to what I do. This is a side response.
Yes.
So I 3D scan stuff, including human remains, for study, and they have a bit where they 3D scan a skeleton that has a QR code embedded in it that has malware that causes a computer to explode. I don't think anyone thinks that's real, but I just need to shout that out because it was like the craziest thing directly related.
I don't know if I ever made it to that episode.
But yeah, in terms of like, you know, things where maybe it's not the most accurate, but sort of the characters are interesting. One thing,
but like terribly inaccurate, but forgivable is sort of
right. Well, so okay, I gotta say River Song, love, yeah, and the other one I think about is Elizabeth Shaw in Prometheus. So it's the alien movies, and at the start of the movie, she's got like a little device that's like a radiocarbon dater that she's just like, bing, oh, this is 16,000 years old. Dreams right there. Not yet, but dreams.
Oh, but now that you've seen it, you can work on building it.
Exactly.
Hey.
But what I really also liked about that movie, right, and this is not a thing where we deconstruct plot holes or whatever, right, but that, you know, talking about how archaeologists sort of have all these other skills, right? Like mapping, like, right, trying to figure out stuff from different cultures, right? That, you know, we're not just doing one thing, but we have sort of diverse skills. And I mean, I also would love to go to space. Call me NASA. I'm less qualified.
I think it's Blue Origin right now.
There's a few people that could call you.
Oh, I'm not picky, any of you. Hey.
So I want to bring up the character. This is sort of an old movie, Contact. The character that's played by Jodie Foster, who now, oh my God, I don't remember what the character's name is. Someone can Google it for me. But she is actually that character is based on a real astronomer, a female astronomer who went to Cornell, and she had there's all these stories about her getting her degree, and the men in the department, because this would be in the 70s when she was getting her PhD, they didn't want to work with her, and so she'd be like, fine, I'm gonna do this by myself, and then of course did it better than anybody. But I just I really like her portrayal as this person who really wants to figure things out and understand more, and is willing to be unconventional and go her own path to do that.
Ellie.
Yeah, that's right, Ellie. And all the alien stuff and the other parts of that movie, of course, are not real, but I just really love her character.
That's awesome. That's beautiful.
Character.
Anyone else have one, or nope, science is bad and it's unforgivable?
I am very glad that they added, or that they had a paleobotanist in just Jurassic Park franchise, because there are a lot of parts of paleontology that you don't think of, like people who study trace fossils, so tracks and coprolites, which is fossilized poop, eggshells and such, and then paleobotanists like Dr. Sattler. I think it's great that they had that written in for the books and in the movies, because we need that representation.
Awesome.
I mean, I feel like most of the time when I'm thinking of unforgivable, especially when it has to do with space, is when more than one thing goes wrong on the spacecraft, you end the mission, period, point blank. And so I often see there being 12, 13, 14, 15 things go wrong, and they're like, don't worry, we'll push through it. I was like, you're not listening to your training. This is not at all what's supposed to happen. It's you got maybe 2 strikes, and then at that point you're like, nope, there's too many things, we need to head home. I can't think of a specific movie, but I've just seen it so many times in pulp culture. But when I think of aerospace engineer, shout out to Chewbacca, who is debatably an aerospace engineer. We can go into that at some point, but I just want to give a little shout out there. I appreciate the intelligence and cunningness of Chewbacca.
But the fluffiest of aerospace engineers.
Oh yeah,
the one with the best hair.
Yes, the one you want to hug the most. In contrast to Tony Stark / Iron Man, who's definitely an aerospace engineer, who is not the person you want to hug the most.
No.
I love his innovative mind. I love that he's extremely logical, problem solving. Unfortunately, you do run into some arrogant people like that. However, his level of arrogance is not a great depiction of how I've seen my peers or even the people that I've worked with. But I'll give it to him. If there were people that could build a spacesuit like that, I'm sure that it's in the works. Like we said, one inspires the other. But I appreciate his intelligence and his creativity. I don't appreciate that they did spoiler alert if you haven't seen it in game, which you should already.
We
But-
probably shouldn't do huge spoilers though, should we? It's been out for a couple years. I don't know. I'll leave it up to your discussion.
Time travel breaks my heart every time. Y'all,
Oh, yeah.
The quantum realm.
like, come on, you're just taking the fact that there's not enough information and then you're using it
Hollywood
to create your
Pixie
own
does.
time. Yeah, again, but that's more than Pixie does. Like,
Oh, but the
Yeah.
Captain
I
America
was-
love story made it forgivable, right?
I was very upset with how the quantum realm looked because I just feel like, well, like there isn't anything there. You can't have like smaller stuff in the quantum realm. Like what are you doing?
absolutely. However, I think what they try to do is what is something unfathomable for humans, like what they're trying to depict something that we've never seen or never thought of before, and so they come up with these like shapes and colors to say like, whoa, what is this? We're in this new space that I've never seen. And so I understand why they're trying to depict it that way, but once you start breaching into time travel in quantum realms, it's so tough. I can't say that there's any place that I've seen that's been like super accurate. So Bill Nye, please make an episode on this for us so that I can have something to point to.
All right,
The
so
only
given
type
that this
Matt Tyson, either one. Collab.
Erica,
I was
sorry,
gonna
go ahead.
say, the only type of like good time travel that I've seen in a movie is again in Interstellar when they send some people down to the planet by the black hole and the time moves faster time moves slower for them and like they go back to the main spaceship and the person that they left behind has aged like 20 years, even though they've only been gone for an hour. And that's the only type of good possible time travel.
Yes, however, how do you make it through a black hole, realistically speaking?
Yeah, well, also, how do you need a giant spaceship to like a giant rocket to get off the planet, and then you can like land on a different planet in a little speeder, and then like take off again from that same planet in a little speeder?
And this is what happens when you add too much movie magic, and then we're like, I don't think that's possible.
Wibbly wobbly, timey wimey. Dot dot dot.
We just all do the time warp from Rocky Horror. Okay, so given that this is Comic-Con, and I know for a fact that every single one of you has cosplayed, I want to hear about how you see cosplay and science and engineering, and like, where is that bridge? I guess I'll start with you, Sam.
Yeah, so like I started cosplay stuff in high school, which was a little while ago. Don't worry about that exactly. But to me, right, that was my first experience actually trying to like dig for data, right? It's like, oh, it's 1999. I need more photos of this, right? I'm going on these websites, right? I'm, both searching for data. I'm also, right, reverse engineering stuff. I'm trying to figure out, I don't have that, right? What can I do with the stuff I have available to me as a 17-year-old in Minnesota, right, to recreate that sort of stuff. So for me, it was like really formative in, right, again, combining that creativity, that reverse engineering, and also just giving myself the confidence to know like, hey, I can create stuff and I'm going to have fun, doing it as well.
Can we ask what that cosplay was?
Yes. So my first major one was a X-Wing pilot costume, which is I should have, the helmet's in the other room. And I had to do extra stuff because I'm smaller than the main market for like X-Wing pilot cosplay. So I had to like do all sorts of bespoke stuff for myself, which was fun. And then I never actually finished it, which is sad because I started it in like 2005. But I did also start a Queen Amidala costume, and I was learning like hand embroidery and stuff. And this is kind of funny, but it actually helped me like learning to source materials. So we do a thing called experimental archaeology, where we try and figure out how things were done in the past, where we don't have, people we can talk to now, by sort of trying to replicate what they did. So we'll make stone tools and we'll butcher an animal to try to figure that out. And cosplay let me find all sorts of places on the internet to source stuff like horsehair, right? Stuff that, you know, you might need for a Queen Amidala costume and you might need for your archaeological reconstruction, but you can't just go to Joann Fabrics and get. So that was important to me as well. And of course, all the people in other archaeologists thought I was crazy, but I was like, no, I'm going to help you. This is
Learn the thing.
So cool.
Yeah.
I love that so much.
For prom, I was the TARDIS. So my dress was the TARDIS, and it had really pretty part of the skirt. So I wore that to prom, and then my group actually went to our first Comic-Con in Houston. We like ended prom early so we could get up the next day and go to Comic-Con. So that was a lot of fun.
Awesome.
And then more recently, I was a part of Princesses with Power Tools. So I got to make a cosplay. I was Kita from Atlantis and figure out how to make her costume and then add a little bit of paleontology to it.
And I think you were actually the only Princesses with Power Tools who completely made their costume from scratch.
I did.
As far as I know.
I'm not very good at sewing.
It looked great though. It looked great.
It was all the good side, and then the back was a little rough.
This is the beautiful part of photos is if you like clip the back or something, no one can see it.
No one knows.
Oh my God. That I definitely had a lot of clipping going on. So my first cosplay taught me the importance of representation and how things translate, because I was rogue, which means I have one gray streak. The entire night, everyone's like, Storm. And I was like, no, rogue. Storm has all white hair. Rogue, okay, nope. All right. So I was like, okay, so there's certain things you have to do to kind of like help people understand like who you are. And I think that was my first experience realizing like how much your props are important, even if it's like trying to help people understand, like I could have done something with my hands. So the next year I gave in, or a couple of years later, I was Storm. But of course I can't just do anything typical. So I had the full-fledged hair dyed white mohawk type Storm. So, but people understood who I was. So that was great. I had the white in the eyes and everything, had the belt, full 9 yards. And then more recently, similarly, I was in Princess with Power Tools as well. And of course, I was Shuri, and that was epic. I agree, making things is so difficult. I spent hours and hours and hours trying to make the neck piece. And by the time I got
It looks incredible.
moderately done, it didn't make it to the photo shoot because it just wasn't gonna happen. It did not look like I needed it to, it was like, it is so challenging. I want to give a special shout out to everyone who makes their costumes. Even if you're buying like supplemental pieces, it is so much time, it is so much work. And there is actually just like a lot of STEM in that, in a sense that your dimensions, your materials that you're using, I struggled with what materials are actually going to work together, because I was like, oh, I'll just put these two things together.
And what's safe to be on a human body too is something cosplayers have to think about that a lot of other industries don't.
Mm-hmm. I realized some materials don't work great with my skin. And then you start pivoting. So like there were so many things, and being able to see what people have done online as well. I definitely found some mentors, and they were fantastic to like make some additional pieces just to try to like set it off. Sewing's not my thing either. I get it. Oh, I like sewed my arm bracelets, and if you could see what was tucked under just to make it work, it was so challenging. I do want to try again to try to make the costume more and have a little bit more accuracy in there, but it was a lot of fun. It was so cool, and you get to transform, and I think we all in a way love to see ourselves transform into different things, whether that's you're getting up on stage and speaking, you have to transform to this confident, most confident version of yourself. Or if you're with your friends and you're just transforming to like the most relaxed, happy version of yourself. And it's like being able to code switch, if you will, and wanting to do that is the cool part. Like it was a desire to become this person for this time, and I got to do that. So I enjoyed it. The experience was great.
Amazing. All right. So to wrap things up, I have one final question for everyone. And I guess let's go back to Sydney for this, and we'll kind of go in reverse order. Speaking of, like, if you could go back in time, not that time travel is a thing here, but what advice would you give your 10-year-old or 10 to 15-year-old self?
I would tell myself, one, to calm down, but two, to really recognize you don't have to have it all figured out today. We're all still figuring it out every day. That's the growth part of it. And especially when I was younger, it really, you felt the pressure of needing to know what you're doing for the next 20, 30 years of your life. And if there's anything we've learned in the past year and a half or so, it's that things can change, and they can change quickly. And you have to be able to stay flexible. So enjoy where you're at right now. It's not, you don't have to rush into anything. This is the time to explore, ask questions, get to know people, find all of us on social media and talk to us, learn about what we're doing, and just have fun. So enjoy the journey, because that's what life is.
Awesome. Miria, do you want to go next?
Sure. I would tell myself to be brave and ask your questions. Don't worry about, thinking you'll look
phenomenal.
Looking embarrassed to ask a question, and be proactive. If you're interested in something, find somebody who does that thing really well and ask them what they like or don't like, because then, if you're young, you can find, or any age, you can just find out what you want to do and what you like and dislike about different fields. So being kind of proactive and being your own cheerleader in that way will really help you in the long run.
So, Erica?
So I would say to my 10-year-old self, you should ask for the things that you want. Like, I cannot believe the amount of contacts I've made or like projects I've started with people by just sending them an email and being like, hey, you don't know me, but I want to do this thing. Like, what do you think about that? And like, just like cold emailing people, or just saying like, oh, I have this idea, I'm going to act on it. Like, has been so incredibly powerful, but it took me a really long time to like learn that skill, to be like, oh, I don't need to wait for somebody else. I can just be like, I want to do this, and then do it. And then it's great.
Amazing. Yeah. I feel like adults need that advice too.
Yeah.
All of us could probably use a little bit of that too. Sam?
Oh, sorry.
You're good.
I was just like, oh my gosh, everything everyone's saying is so good and like on the nose. And I think this kind of, I'll try to like, I think this sort of encompasses what folks were saying, right? But I think for me, right, I was an anxious wreck. I'm still an anxious wreck. Full disclosure, right? But, I think, realizing that, as you were saying, you don't have to wait, right? And right, science is about trying things. It's about experimenting, right? We're testing, and honestly, the expectation is things are going to go wrong a lot of the time, right? And that's the only way we're going to learn more stuff. So, right, understanding that's part of the process, and especially if you're trying something new, right? If you're trying to learn something on your own, right? Honestly, that sort of experimentation, that creativity, right? That can be fun and rewarding in and of itself, and it doesn't have to be scary. So, right, even if there's like not a class for something, right, there's so much information out there. And I know I wouldn't be where I am today if I hadn't just started trying to do things because I thought it was interesting. So I think I just tell my 10-year-old self, like, it's going to be okay. You're an anxious wreck. You still will be an anxious wreck. But you know what? Like, it's going to be okay. And frankly, you're going to have a lot of fun along the way. So that's,
Amazing. Yeah, since no one took mine, I'm gonna also share what I would tell my 10-year-old self, and that's that like failure is part of the process, and everyone who's successful in their field has failed hundreds of thousands of times, and maybe they don't tell you, and maybe they do tell you, but I guarantee you it happened, and you're gonna fail too, and that's like completely okay.
Let me
Thank
add
you guys.
one last thing to that. Sorry.
Yeah.
Nelson Mandela said, I never lose. I either win or I learn. So also reframing how you look at failure as a learning opportunity, because you learn so much more from a failure than you do a success, because you just breeze past success and you're like, great, next. With failure, you really start to reflect. So look at it as a point of growth versus a place of just like ending failure.
Which is an awesome way to end. Thank you guys so much. Real quick, before we let you go, how can people who are watching this panel keep up with your work and maybe contact you, your thoughts, share some social media? Let's just like go around. Let's just do the same order we just did. I'm at Zyla Foxland on all platforms.
I'm at C Sid Soar, like C Spot Run, but like C Sydney Soar. So at C Sid Soar on all platforms.
You can find me at Paleontologica on Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, same handle.
You can find me at Erica Hamden on Twitter and Instagram.
And you can find me at Sam Scans Stuff, another triple S one. And I am on Insta and Twitter.
Amazing. Thank you guys so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And thank you everyone who came for coming to Comic-Con.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Enjoy Comic-Con.